Ronald S. Crane's work, Critics and Criticism, Ancient and Modern, captures the principles of the Chicago School of Criticism, a movement that sought to redefine the aims and methods of literary analysis in mid 20th century academia. Edited by Crane, this collection of essays by scholars associated with the University of Chicago, including Elder Olson, Richard McKeown, and W.R. Keast, among others, advocates for a pluralistic, historically grounded approach to criticism, positioning itself in deliberate contrast to the dominant new critical methodologies of the time. The book's central thesis revolves around the necessity of methodological diversity in criticism, drawing on classical frameworks, particularly Aristotelian poetics, to argue for a more flexible, context sensitive analysis of literary works. Through its rigorous engagement with both ancient and modern critical traditions, the volume not only challenges the dogmas of its contemporaries but also lays the groundwork for later developments in literary theory. The Chicago School, as represented in this collection, distinguishes itself by its rejection of the new critics' emphasis on the autonomous text and their fixation on paradox, ambiguity, and irony as universal markers of literary value. Instead, Crane and his colleagues propose a return to Aristotelian principles not as a rigid template but as a heuristic tool adaptable to the analysis of diverse genres and historical periods. The essays collectively argue that criticism should be guided by the specific causes of a work, its formal structure, its intended emotional effects, its cultural context, and its moral or philosophical purpose, rather than by one size fits all interpretive strategy. This approach reflects a broader commitment to what Crane calls critical pluralism. Critical pluralism is the idea that different literary works demand different critical lenses and that the role of the critic is to match method to object rather than force all texts into a predetermined analytical mold. The volume is the critique of what the Chicago School perceives as the reductive tendencies of new criticism. In his essay, The Critical Monism of Cleon Brooks, Crane takes aim at Brooks's The Well-Wrought Urn, urging that Brooks's insistence on irony as the defining feature of poetry leads to a narrow, homogenizing view of literary works. Crane contends that such monism, the elevation of a single critical principle to universal applicability, flattens the richness and variety of literature, obscuring the distinct aims and achievements of individual texts. Instead, the Chicago critics advocate for a more capacious understanding of literary value, one that acknowledges multiple forms of excellence depending on genre, historical moment, and authorial intention. This argument is extended in Elder Olson's contributions, which emphasize the importance of distinguishing between different kinds of poetry and evaluating each according to its own formal logic and telos. The collection's engagement with classical criticism, particularly Aristotle's Poetics, is not merely antiquarian but deeply pragmatic. The Chicago critics mine Aristotelian concepts such as plot structure, character agency, and catharsis to develop a flexible analytical toolkit applicable beyond Greek tragedy. For instance, Olson's essay An Outline of Poetic Theory reinterprets Aristotle's emphasis on plot, mythos, as the soul of tragedy, extending it to other narrative forms including the novel. Richard McKeown's essay on critical diversity underscores the enduring relevance of classical rhetoric and dialectic in understanding how arguments are constructed within literary texts. By revitalizing ancient frameworks, the Chicago School seeks to bridge a gap between historical criticism and formal analysis, arguing that attention to a work's historical embeddedness need not come at the expense of close reading. One of the volume's strengths lies in its practical demonstrations of methodological pluralism. W.R. Key's analysis of King Lear exemplifies this as he combines Aristotelian concepts of tragic error, hamartia, with an examination of Renaissance notions of moral order to unpack the play's emotional and ethical complexities. Norman MacLean's essay on King Lear and the natural world integrates formal analysis with historical context, showing how the play's imagery reflects early modern anxieties about humanity's relationship to nature. These essays illustrate the Chicago School's conviction that effective criticism must be both theoretically informed and empirically grounded, weaving together close reading, genre study, and cultural history. While championing pluralism, the Chicago critics occasionally betray a lingering preference for Aristotelian categories, leading some later scholars to accuse them of merely replacing one monism, new critical irony, with another, neo Aristotelian formalism. Crane anticipates this critique in his introduction, conceding that no critical method is entirely free of bias, but insisting that self aware eclecticism is preferable to unreflective dogma. The essays also grapple with the challenge of balancing theoretical rigor with practical criticism, a tension evident in Crane's own ambivalence about whether criticism should prioritize the development of universal principles or the interpretation of individual works. This ambivalence reflects a broader methodological debate within the humanities about the relationship between theory and practice, a debate that remains unresolved. While the Chicago School never achieved the cultural dominance of new criticism, its insistence on methodological diversity influenced later movements, including reader response theory and post structuralism. The book's rehabilitation of rhetorical and historical analysis also prefigured the historicist turn in 1980s literary studies, even as its Aristotelianism set it apart for more radical postmodern critiques. The collection serves as a reminder of the richness of mid century critical discourse, offering an alternative vision of literary theory that is neither naively positivist nor dismissive of authorial agency. Its essays remain valuable not only for their specific insights into works from Sophocles to Joyce, but also for their broader argument that criticism thrives when it embraces multiplicity of methods, traditions, and perspectives. In an era of ongoing methodological fragmentation, Crane's call for recent diversity in criticism retains a provocative urgency.